Okay, back on the show and joined now by the former big leaguer Dave Collins. Richard Skinner joins us once again. Guys, we, believe it or not, have hit Labor Day with the Reds not really in contention. They can play their way back in, sure, stranger things have happened, but all in all, for these final 26 or so games, what are they playing for, Dave?
Pride.
Yeah.
And next year. I think a lot of guys are playing for their jobs, and that's the way it should be, especially a team that's been favored to win the division, and some people picked them to win the World Series. It's been a disappointing year. I don't think you can blame injuries. Every club has injuries. That's why you got a AAA ball club and you prepare for backup plans. But this has been a disappointing year. For me, the last 20-some games they got, they're playing for pride, and hopefully they'll finish strong.
Skinny, they went from 6.5, 7 out before the All-Star break to 1.5 out just before that break. Any shot at being able to do that over the next 30 days?
You can't believe it without, Brandon Phillips is still compromised. Jay Bruce talked today about it's embarrassing to him in the Enquirer. Votto, even if he comes back, what can you expect from him? So, no, I just cannot see it. And they're going to start playing some contenders, too. It's almost impossible.
And they made a trade early on Sunday with Jonathan Broxton moving on to first place Milwaukee. He gets a break because he's got a chance to contend now. They get 2 players back to be named later. Always popular guys. But it's popular because it saves some money, because it's not likely that either of these players combined will earn $9 million next year. Was this basically a salary dump?
It was. I mean, I think everybody was disappointed at the July 31st trade deadline that they didn't do something along these lines or to get somebody back. You've got to either add to your roster or shed salary, and they've shed salary in this case. It gives you a chance in the offseason to maybe add a bat. The funny part to this is, I think it bodes that Aroldis Chapman is still the closer. I don't think a lot of fans want that. I'm not sure Dave wants that. At the end of the day, this is not probably the best move if that's what you wanted. If you wanted Chapman to be a starter, this is not going to happen now.
But do you want Chapman to be the starter?
I don't.
Dave?
I don't know if Dave does, but yeah.
If you have a player who is arguably the best at his position in the entire game, arguably, do you want to mess with that?
Well,
even if he can be a starter, physically and mentally and all that, do you want to mess with that?
Well, here's the way I look at it. For them to win a World Series, do they have 1, 2, and 3 guys that can go in the playoffs and dominate? And you've got Johnny Cueto, who's one of the best pitchers in baseball. To me, if you've got Chapman to go along with him, you got 2 #1 pitchers that can dominate anybody in the game. I like Chapman as a starter just because he's a dominator, and he's a guy that every time he gets the ball, he's going to win.
Okay, so take me through his offseason. If they were to do something like this, what would his offseason consist of, so when he shows up in Goodyear for the first day of pitchers and catchers, he's ready to go as a starter?
What I would do is I would start building him up innings in spring training, and knowing that he is not going to be durable maybe the first year, is don't start him as a starter at the beginning of the season. Bring him in as a starter maybe sometime in May. Give him 5 or 6 innings early in the season and build him up towards the end of the season where he'd be strong in the playoffs. That's the way I'd handle it.
What do you think? I mean, is this something that Chapman necessarily is not in favor of?
Yeah, if Broxton was still on the roster, I would say absolutely give that a shot. But he's not on the roster, and you have nobody else to close. I mean,
right.
You really and truly don't. In theory, if Sean Marshall were to come back healthy, maybe him, but that's a big if.
You can't rely on it.
I liked Hoover 2 years ago. I loved him. I don't love him anymore. Neither does anybody else. There's no one else on the roster right now that can close. A lot of people will tell you can find a lot of guys to close. I don't believe that.
Yeah, but you can't, because it's not just about
I don't believe it.
There's a mental makeup to being a closer. Right. That it's not
Chapman
just throwing
loves it. He absolutely thrives on that.
He does. And if they ever were to get themselves into a postseason situation where they needed him to slam the door, that's the kind of mentality that you want. Jay Bruce, you alluded to it, said this is the most embarrassing season of his life. I read that, and I didn't believe, I couldn't remember that he had finished 10th in MVP voting the last 2 years. Dave, is it just a matter of him having come back from the knee injury too soon? Or is it something else? Because it's not like he was on fire April, May either.
You're right.
Well, you don't have a good year every year.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes you're going to have a bad season, and this is what's happened this year to Jay. I think he's put a lot of pressure on himself with Votto and Phillips being out of the lineup and him trying to pick up the weight for them being gone. And he's also been hurt. And I think he came back and tried to do too much, and he's lost his confidence. I mean, he's not even close to being the same hitter he was the last couple of years. We'll find out next year, because he got a big dose of humble pie this year, but I believe he'll regroup and come back next year, and I think you'll see a different player.